This is Arnhemland in tropical Australia. Conditions here are so wild and hostile that your average Brit lost here would die in under a week. But for the Australian Aborigine, this has been home for at least 40,000 years.
The rock paintings in this ancient art gallery show us how they've survived through that time by their knowledge of the local animals and plants. I've come here to see that knowledge in action and discover how they handle the dangers. Arnhemland sits to the east of Darwin, right at the top of Australia. It's an Aboriginal reserve, protecting their traditional life on tiny outstations or villages like Jibalbal. It's illegal to enter without Aboriginal permission. This land is a challenging mixture of floodplain, mangrove swamp and tropical forest, with searing heat in the summer and torrential rain in the winter. No Europeans settled here until the 1920s. It was just too tough and rife with malaria. So the Aborigines lived in their outstations relatively undisturbed, and their skills have survived intact. There are just 20 people in the outstation of Jibalbal. They live mostly by the food they hunt and gather, but there is a growing international trade in Aboriginal art and craft, and that provides cash. So they can buy what they want of the Western world while still maintaining a traditional lifestyle.
You
need 4 things to survive any climate: shelter, food, fire, and clean drinking water. Finding that here is perhaps the most crucial and potentially dangerous job of them all. Temperatures are high. They can reach 30 degrees all year round, with crippling humidity in the wet season. Water is essential. Heat exhaustion can kill you in a matter of hours. There are plenty of rivers, but huge tides push salt water miles inland, and salt water brings these. Saltwater crocodiles are both dangerous and intelligent. I've been told not to use the same path down to a river more than once. If they see you there the first day, they'll wait at the same spot on the second, then pull you in and under. But there is an alternative.
This is what we're looking for. It's the paperbark. Now, there are lots of them around here, but it's this particular feature is what we're after, this bulge. And this may indicate that this tree contains water. But there's only one way to find out, and that's to cut into there. That's incredible. It's even quite sweet. Now that's safe water because the tree itself has filtered all the impurities and bacteria out of it.
For Aborigines, fire is an important tool, and for more than just cooking. Matches are easy to come by, but Michael, an elder of Jibalbal, still knows how to make nature's secret fire.
Michael, how old were you when you first learned this technique?
A little bit.
He was about 16 or something, teenage.
First, he flattens the stick to make a hearth, drills in a hollow and carves a notch into it. A stick of the same wood twirled into the hollow causes a hot dust to spew out of the notch. It's hot enough to make fire.
children today may have trouble lighting fire the old way, but they certainly know what to do with it. There you go.
This may look like the Young Pyromaniacs Club, but Aborigines encourage their children to set fires from an early age. It's the end of the rainy season, the ground is wet, and heavy dews will damp down these patches of fire each morning. Because the land is burned regularly, the fires move quickly, just clearing out the dense scrub on the forest floor, but leaving big trees alive and still standing. For the Aborigines, this technique has many benefits.
It may look destructive, but it's not. It's actually essential for regenerating plant life. These succulent new growths are going to entice game, such as wallabies, into this area. And with the dead vegetation burned away, hunting becomes much easier.
It's a debatable technique, but the fires also act as signals. Outstations are widely scattered over this vast landscape, and Aborigines travel miles from their homes to hunt and gather plants. The plumes of smoke identify just who's working where, and that helps to prevent any one area from being hunted out.
But if you're going to survive up here for more than a few weeks, you're going to need to find protein, and that means hunting or fishing. What do you reckon, Johnny? Do you think this one will make a good spear? Yeah? Right here? Yeah. Good. It's quite springy, isn't it?
Making a spear is much more complicated than carving a digging stick. I'm told this macaranga wood must dry out in the sun for one day before the real work can begin. For the Aborigines, their land is like a superstore. It holds just about everything they need, and although the aisles stretch for hundreds of miles, they know exactly where and when to find what they want. The women go out gathering every day. They do grow a few plants in gardens closer to home, but tasty water lilies flourish in wet, swampy ground, so they'll travel to find them. Gathering is hard work, so some are eaten on the spot. The rest, though, will be carried home to feed the outstation. This morning, it's back to the macaranga spears. The first step is to get them hot. That makes them pliable so the bends can be straightened out. And because most of the moisture inside the sticks was evaporated in the sun, these spears will stay straight when they cool. Arnhemland has only had metal for the last 200 years, so Aborigines still hold their knives like they were stone tools. Placed the traditional hardwood prongs, and the binding is now done with fishing lines instead of banyan fibres. Aboriginal people are improvisers. They use whatever is easy and nearest to hand.
I get it. So that wedge is going to splay the points out and hold them in really tight, yeah?
Yeah.
Aborigines are the only people legally permitted to hunt inside Arnhemland. It's dangerous. They're fishing for barramundi, and wherever you find them, you find crocodiles. So you've got to keep your eyes open. I've heard tales of a croc 8 meters long.
While the boys are fishing, they've asked me to collect some things they're going to need for the cooking, which includes some of this termite mound.
Believe it or not, This will burn like charcoal, hot and long.
I'm also going to need a bit of this paper bark. And we're going to need these leaves to keep the food clean while it's cooking.
We're going to make a traditional steam oven, and we're cooking catfish and long-necked turtle. The fire is loaded with termite mound, and once it's hot, the embers are spread out to make a good wide base to the oven. The leaves will stop the food getting dirty and give a good flavour. This paper bark makes a natural blanket to cover the fire, the food, and keep the heat in. And finally, soil seals the entire oven so that the food inside will steam as the embers smoulder. A turtle takes about 20 minutes in here, but larger ovens can handle kangaroo and even buffalo. And here it is, one lunchtime turtle. This type of cooking is a lesson in simplicity. There's no fussy preparation, and by steaming the food, they preserve most of the nutrients.
Cheers, Johnny. Tastes a bit like stringy, sort of chewy fish.
The beauty of this oven is that it's tailor-made for a life in the bush. If you're hunting far from home, you can make it anywhere, anytime.
The Aborigines were semi-nomadic people, and that meant they had to be able to put up shelters to protect themselves from rain and from insects. These forks are going to make the supports.
There's very little discussion on a project like this. They just get on with it. But then, it's a familiar task. They only stopped living in these shelters in the 1970s. What appeals to me most is that they don't need string or nails. The construction has so much Aboriginal simplicity, it stands up on its own.
For the roof, we're going to need some paper bark.
As we're in the dry season, a flat roof shelter like this is fine. In the wet, the roof would be slanted.
Paper bark also makes a good bed, and I'm set for a good night's sleep. But in an hour's time, the sun will go down, and then the mosquitoes come out, and if I don't have some form of extra protection, the night will be simply hellish. What we're going to make is a smudge fire, and to keep the insects away, I'm going to burn this ant bed on top of the fire.
Arnhemland mosquitoes carry something nasty called Ross River fever. They can bite through the thick hide of a buffalo and can get at us through 2 layers of clothing.
The director and crew are already getting bitten, but in here it may be a bit smoky, but the mosquitoes aren't biting.
I couldn't help wondering, though, if I'd wake up like that cooked turtle. But unscathed, I took up an invitation to visit Yilan, an outstation by the coast. The communities in Arnhemland really are out in the wild, with vast tracts of land between each, so getting lost is easy. In remote parts of Europe, you might lose your way for a few hours. In America, it might be a few days. But here, you can wander for months without seeing any sign of civilization. Luckily, nature has provided her own signposts, if you know where to look.
We call these magnetic termite mounds. They're not actually magnetic, but they do act like a compass needle pointing north, south. And the reason for that is that this face is aligned to get the morning sun in the east and the evening sun in the west. If you point your compass along them, it's remarkable how accurate they are. If you lose your compass out here, that can be a really useful guide to help you find your direction.
And if you do spot anyone, you can use the strength of the sun to signal for help, with a mirror. Round here, it's better than lighting a fire to attract attention. People would think you were burning the scrub and leave you well alone.
The river's a lot wider here, so I must be nearing the coast. And I've noticed that the forest is changing now to mangrove. Now that is a totally different world.
In mangrove forest, the root systems extend overground, forming an obstacle course of wooden spaghetti that can come up as high as your chest. But this doesn't deter the experts, because mangroves are also teeming with food. One of the favourites here is the teredo or mangrove worm, which I'm promised tastes better than it sounds.
The little hole here, that's the sign that there's mangrove worms in there.
So they actually live in the wood and not in the mud?
Not in the mud, they actually live in the wood.
So how do you get at them?
This worm was the curse of early mariners. It could munch its way through the stoutest wooden ship. I'm told they're a delicacy, but I'm really not convinced.
What's it taste like, Rex?
Salty.
Salty. That's actually pretty good. I'm surprised. This is the bit you don't eat, it's the hard shell. It's actually a mollusk. It bores its way into the wood. And I'll be quite honest with you, I thought it was going to taste revolting, but it doesn't. It tastes like crab pate, and I wouldn't mind eating another one. Here on the coast, the mosquitoes are particularly bad. Now for adults that may be a nuisance, but for infants it can be a life-threatening problem. But as always, local ingenuity has the answer.
This time it's the pandanus tree that comes to the rescue. The long stringy leaves contain fibres that make a unique mosquito net.
And this is all pandanus fibre.
Oh, I see. It's designed as a cover for babies and will take several days to finish, even working at this speed.
Right, so that goes over the child. He's inside and the mosquitoes can't get in. He seems very happy in there. That's ingenious.
The Arnhemland Aborigines are one of the oldest living cultures, actively maintaining their traditional life. But how secure is it?
That's depend on our young ones actually, and how we as an elder or our old people try and influence our young ones to sort of take on more responsibility in looking after our cultural life basically.
Having fought hard to hold on to their lands and their way of life, it's now down to the next generation to preserve their culture. The children must make the choice to learn from the elders.
In our way of life, our elders sit around, paint. Young ones would come around and sit by him, just watch from day to day. You feel like you guys call it imitating. So he just sits there. As he grows older, he goes out and practice. I think you guys, I heard a little saying that practice makes perfect. So that's how it works out.
Arnhemland is a unique spot. If it wasn't for this harsh climate and difficult terrain, the white settlers would have moved in long before the 1920s, and Aboriginal skills would have been lost. But now it's a protected reserve. The people here have seen what the West can offer, yet they've chosen to stand by their culture and their bond with the land. Today, Aborigines are recognised by the government as the first Australians, and they have a strong voice in Parliament. So long as their children carry on these skills, this life will continue.
Yeah, perfectly cooked, eh? Beautiful. Yeah, really good.